The Android handheld gaming market in 2025 has become confusing, and not in a fun way, more in a why are there 17 different devices that all look identical but cost wildly different amounts way. There are dozens of options between $150 and $500, and working out which one you should actually buy requires understanding processor generations, display technologies, battery chemistry, thermal management, and the reputation of companies whose names sound like somebody smashed their keyboard and called it branding. Even after researching properly, you're still making compromises. Every single device sacrifices something important. Battery life for performance, display quality for price, build quality for portability, the ability to play Switch games for the ability to afford next month's rent. There's no perfect handheld out there. There probably never will be. Anybody claiming otherwise is either lying or trying to sell you an extended warranty. Retroid just announced two new devices, the Pocket 6 starting at $229 and the Pocket G2 at $219, with pre-order discounts bringing those down to $209 and $199 respectively. They've got compromises too, and we'll discuss those later, but they're targeting price points where the competition has developed some peculiar problems. And by peculiar, I mean catches fire, or requires aftermarket accessories to be physically holdable, or might work perfectly, or might not work at all. You enjoy the uncertainty. The question isn't whether these are perfect devices, because perfection just doesn't exist below $500 and barely exists above it. The question is whether their specific compromises matter less than the specific compromises of everything else that you would buy for similar money. So here we are, about to work out whether these devices are actually worth your money, or whether Retroid has just released two more rectangles into an already crowded market of rectangles that all promise to play your childhood, but with better graphics. Join me as we navigate pricing that's separated by $10, specifications that sound impressive until you actually understand what they mean, and the eternal question of whether you really need flagship performance or whether you're just going to play Pokemon for the 4,000th time. The RP6 and the G2 both have 5.5-inch OLED displays, which means deeper blacks, more vibrant colours. Your retro games will look considerably better than you remember them looking in your childhood, instead of like somebody drew them on tracing paper. Except for Paper Mario, who looks better when drawn on tracing paper. Both run Android, both have 3D Hall effect sticks, which means precise control without drift. Both have active cooling. Both are small enough to fit in a pocket as long as you're wearing cargo pants. The specifications start to diverge after that, though, and understanding these differences matters. The Retroid Pocket 6 uses a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. That's a flagship chip from 2022, the same processor that you will find in expensive smartphones from a few years back. It's powerful, it's well understood, and critically, emulator developers have had years to optimize their software for it, which matters enormously because powerful processor is only useful if the software can actually use that power effectively. The display runs at 120 Hz rather than the standard 60. There's a 6,000 mAh battery that translates to roughly 6 to 8 hours of gaming. You get 8 or 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5 RAM, 128 or 256 gigs of UFS 3.1 storage, Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 3.5, and it runs Android 13. The pricing is $229 for the base 8 gig, 128 gig configuration, and $279 for the 12 gig 256 configuration. Early bird pricing drops those to $209 and $259 respectively. The Retroid Pocket G2 uses a Snapdragon G2 Gen 2. The G2 series chips are designed specifically for gaming handhelds rather than adapted from phone processors, which means that they prioritize efficiency and sustained performance over peak power. The display runs at 60 Hz. There's a 5,000 mAh battery delivering an estimated 7 to 9 hours of use, despite the smaller capacity, because efficiency matters more than raw numbers. It has 8 GB of LPDDR5X RAM. At least that's what it says on the spec sheet. This would make the RAM in the G2 slightly faster than the RP6, and I don't know whether this is accurate or an oversight in somebody's typing. It certainly seems odd to me that the RP6 has slower RAM, so it may not be accurate. We'll have to wait and see. And 128 gig of UFS 3.1 storage in here as well, with TF card slots for expansion. You get Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.4, and it runs Android 15. The price is $219 retail, $199 early bird, so that's $10 difference between the G2 and the base RP6. $10 separating entry-level model emulation from proven flagship performance, which is fascinating because that $10 gap changes the entire conversation about who these devices are for. One more thing worth mentioning about the RP6 and the G2, they use stick bottom layouts with D-pads in the primary top position. And if you're primarily playing retro games where the D-pad matters most, your NES, SNES, Genesis, PS1 titles, this is more comfortable for extended sessions because your thumb rests naturally on the D-pad. If you're coming from Xbox or Switch controllers and spend most of your time in 3D games requiring dual analog devices, well, things like the Odin series with stick top layouts might feel more natural. It's a preference thing, but it's worth considering based on what you actually play. That Android version difference is worth mentioning as well. Android 15 is the current version, which means the G2 will have better long-term app compatibility, newer features, longer software support. Android 13 on the RP6 is still perfectly functional, but the G2 is starting with a 2-generation advantage in terms of software longevity. Whether that matters to you depends on how long you plan to keep this device for, but it is a genuine advantage. Now, to understand what these devices can actually do, we need to look at the market that they're entering. The Android handheld space splits into 3 tiers. The premium tier starts at $350 and climbs to $549. Devices like the AYN Odin 3 and Conquer Pocket Elite by Ioneo use the new Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, maximum performance on paper, but nobody has these in their hands yet, so you're betting on early adoption with a chipset that may have emulation compatibility issues until it's been properly tested and optimized. Premium prices for unproven performance. The budget tier sits below $200. Devices like the Anbernic RG556 at $185, though Anbernic adds on tariffs at checkout for some regions, which can bump the price up closer to that $200 mark or even over it. You get solid performance for retro systems and some impressive features like OLED displays, but with clear limitations on more demanding emulation. Then there's the value performance tier, between $200 and $300. And this is where both the Retroid devices sit. The AYN Odin 2 uses the same Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 as the RP6. The catch is pricing. The base model is no longer available. You're looking at $299 for a refurbished Max or $339 for a brand new Pro. But we can use this to see what the RP6 might get us. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has years of proven performance, strong Switch emulation across a vast majority of the library, including many demanding titles, Windows PC games via WinLater and GameHub, excellent PS2, GameCube, Wii, 3DS performance. This is a ship at the top of its game. So that's the landscape, and that's where Retroid is being exceptionally clever. The Retroid Pocket 6 at $229 for the base model isn't just offering good value. It's fundamentally disrupting the mid-range market. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has years of proven performance in devices like the AYN Odin 2. We know exactly what it's capable of. Previously, getting this level of performance meant spending around $300. The RP6 undercuts that by $70 to $110 whilst in this early bird pricing. While including an OLED display at 120Hz and Wi-Fi 7, that's a pretty good value because that Wi-Fi 7 matters more than it sounds. It's the current generational standard with lower latency and better handling of network congestion. For cloud gaming through the GeForce Now or Xbox Cloud Gaming, that's, when you're streaming games from remote servers and latency matters enormously, Wi-Fi 7 makes a meaningful difference to input lag and connection stability. Most competitors in this field are still on Wi-Fi 6. The RP6 gives you Wi-Fi 7 at a price point when you shouldn't really expect it. The 120Hz display amplifies this. Put a 60Hz and 120Hz screen side by side, and the difference is immediately obvious. Everything feels smoother, more responsive, more... Look, it's not essential. 60Hz is perfectly adequate for retro gaming, but it's the kind of premium feature that makes a device feel expensive in a good way. And here's where Retroid is being exceptionally clever. They've created two devices that aren't really competing with each other. They're attacking the market from opposite ends of the spectrum using a powerful psychological tool, price anchoring. The Retroid Pocket G2 at $219 is aimed squarely at the buyer whose budget is anchored to the higher-end Ambonic devices. Once you factor in those extra costs, the prices are already close to $200. The G2 asks, why not stretch just a little bit more? And for that small stretch, it elevates you from a capable retro device into something that can handle more demanding systems consistently. It's designed for the budget-conscious buyer stretching up. The Retroid Pocket 6, starting at $229, is for the buyer anchored against premium prices. They see $300 plus and refuse to go there. The RP6 brings that exact same flagship performance down to their price point. It's for the performance-focused buyer who just won't stretch up. And by doing this, Retroid isn't just releasing more new rectangles, they are disrupting the market by capturing both the aspiring budget gamer and the frugal enthusiast simultaneously. For most people looking at mid-range devices, the base RP6 at $229 is the obvious choice. It's only $10 more than the G2, and that $10 buys you substantially more capability. That gap is small enough that if you're already considering spending $219, most people might stretch to that $229 for better performance. The 12GB RP6 at $279 is more for enthusiasts who know what they want and know that they'll use the extra RAM for Switch and Windows emulation. But who these devices are not for matters just as much. The G2 isn't for somebody who wants strong Switch performance. You'll get entry-level capability. Some games will run acceptably, some very well. Demanding titles might struggle. At least that's what we know about this chip at the moment. That could change as more details are being released, but I would say if Switch is 50% or more of what you intend to pay, then spend at least the extra $10 for the RP6. It's not for somebody who already owns an RP5 and is happy with it. The upgrade is meaningful, but it's probably not essential enough to justify replacing a working device. The RP6, on the other hand, isn't for somebody who already owns an Odin 2, unless it's broken. You've got the same processor, a better battery life, the upgrades are the display and the Wi-Fi, really. And unless those specific features matter to you enormously, you're spending $229 for marginal improvement. I should add in caveats for all of this. There could well be specific features that push you to want the RP6 over an older device that you already have. Some people have been craving this much power with the layout for some time, with the stick up at the bottom. And if that's enough of an upgrade to get you to open your wallet, then you're probably doing the right thing. But here's the uncomfortable truth about buying technology. Most people overestimate what they will use and underestimate what they actually need. You imagine yourself playing dozens of Switch games and Windows titles when, in reality, you'll probably play 5 Switch games, find 2 that run well, and spend most of your time playing Super Mario World on the SNES. Because it's comfortable and familiar, and that's why we pick up these devices in the first place. The G2 is designed for somebody stretching from budget devices. If you've been looking at higher-end Ambinic devices, spending $199 to $219 for the G2 gets you much better capability as well as more consistent and capable performance for demanding systems. You're anchored to budget pricing, and the G2 represents the best value for stretching that budget to its maximum potential. The RP6 is designed for somebody who doesn't want to stretch up to premium pricing. You know flagship performance costs well over $300, and you're not willing to go there. At $229 to $279, the RP6 brings that performance down to you instead. You're anchored to avoiding premium prices, and the RP6 delivers premium capability without the premium cost. That's why they're disruptors. They're not competing with each other. They're attacking different price anchors from different directions. The G2 elevates budget buyers. The RP6 captures premium buyers. For most people already considering the G2 at $219, spending $10 more for the RP6 makes sense if you want more performance. But if you came to this decision from looking at Ambinic devices, that $10 represents stretching your budget even further, possibly to breaking point, and the G2 already gives you more than you expected for money that you're comfortable spending. Both devices represent Retroid understanding something important. The market doesn't need more devices with the absolute best specifications. What it needs is devices that match what people actually do at prices that feel reasonable for where they're starting from, without requiring extensive technical knowledge or accepting significant compromises. So should you buy one of these devices? At these price points, you are getting incredible specs and the ability to play a vast library of games, no matter which model you go for. I was all set to say, hold off on these devices until... But I can't, because if you want that sort of performance, there just isn't anything quite like these out there for the price. Maybe an RP5, but these are so much more powerful. Even so, I can't put my hand in my pocket to pick up either one of these, and that's the reality of spending too much money on your YouTube channel already this month. But if these devices look good to you, then I would absolutely say yes, go for it. We know what Retroid's like. We know that you're going to get a well-built device which could potentially last you for years. And if you've got your own thoughts on these devices, or if you've decided to buy one, or if you're firmly against them for some reason, I don't know, I would love to know what you think in the comments below. But that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you have, and I'll see you next time that we shuffle into this retro corner. It's only left for me to say thank you ever so much for watching. It's really appreciated, and for all the wonderful comments that I've had on these videos in the past. And until next time we meet, happy gaming.